Well, welcome to this May Entuity Tech Talk. For those of you who are new to Entuity Tech Talks, these sessions are designed specifically for customers, as well as technical members of our authorized partner community. Today, we're going to look at SNMP Trap Management, an enhanced feature found in Entuity 15. I did want to mention, too, that previous Tech Talks are available on demand via video on the Entuity Learning Center, located on the resources page at entuity.com, as well as on the Entuity YouTube Center. That's well worth checking out. I'm John Diamond, Principal Solutions Architect at Entuity, and also with me today is my colleague Pete Bartz, who's a Field Systems Engineer, and we will be your hosts for the next 30 minutes or so. Today, we're talking specifically about the Entuity 15 product. And if you're not currently running 15, you're missing out on some significant features. This slide shows the enhancements of our last 3 revisions of the product to give you a quick idea of what has been developed to keep our product current. The next revision of Entuity will be available later this month, Entuity 15.5. Details on these new enhancements will be forwarded soon. Keep an eye out for them. I just want to set the scene as to how the new SNMP Trap Handling, which was released in Entuity 15, fits in with the history of SNMP Trap Handling within previous versions of Entuity. Up until and before 15, there has been a significant SNMP Trap Handling capability, and it was split across 3 different trap handling technologies. First of all, there are a collection of approximately 7 generic traps, including link up, link down, and some reboot traps that are handled very specifically within the product and assign events and incidents. Then, previously, there was a group of traps we referred to as enterprise traps, which had specific handling. They all generated the same event, which was called enterprise trap, and there were specific ways in which the details gathered from their var bindings were formatted for display purposes. Then there was an opportunity to import other vendor proprietary trap MIBs and customize the traps that are described within those MIBs to your own requirements so that they could be added to the list of traps that could be handled and turned into events and therefore incidents. So there's 3 different mechanisms previously. In version 15, we've simplified that. We've done away with that middle concept that we used to call enterprise traps because, frankly, turning them all into the same event really wasn't as helpful as it might have been. We now have the generic traps still handled separately, and then all other traps can be handled under the control of the new trap handling capability, which is now fully incorporated within the enterprise, the event management system, which we call the EMS. Now, that has many advantages, one of which is that previously with what we would call the Open Trap Receiver, or OTR, that was the trap handling, the customized trap handling before version 15, that had to be configured by importing a trap file that had been manually copied to the server, parsing it using a command line utility that had to be executed at the command line on the server, adjusting the results using the Java component viewer, and then finally the rest of the configuration was performed within the event management system through the web UI. A number of steps required. Now everything is done through the web UI, including importing the MIB file if it's not already on the server. So everything is web-based. Furthermore, as it's all part of the EMS, any customizations you make are then held within the same EMS project as all of the other EMS customizations. So it's very straightforward to export that project and then import it on a different server. so it's all kept together. That's just a few of the advances, and I'm going to allow my colleague, Pete Bartz, to tell you a lot more detail and take you through a worked example to show you all of the other aspects that this new enhancement is bringing to the table. Pete, it's all yours.
Thanks, JD, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Tech Talk. And I think you should be able to see my screen now. JD, can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Sounds good, thanks. So before I go into the demo, and we'll actually run through an example of taking a trap and bringing it into the system, importing it, creating some rules, and looking at incidents. I want to talk about if you've got a system, certainly prior to 15.0, and you're currently using the trap processing. Let's talk about, if I have that system, what are the differences as I upgrade from 14.5 or 14 up to 15? Now, one thing that you'll want to do when you upgrade to 15 is install patch 1. There's some significant trap processing additions in patch 1 that I'll talk about in a minute. But make sure when you go to 15, also install patch 1 at the same time. Let me show you an example of the migration that I did from 14.5 to 15. So this is a 14.5 system that I've got, and I'm currently 3 traps that I've got in this system. One of the traps is just the generic trap. It's got a severity level of 1. One of the events that I've got, I've upgraded it to a severity level 2, and I've actually also created an incident. And the third one, I've just created a severity level 3. I don't have any other incidents or anything with it. So in my 14.5 system again, I've got an additional rule in addition to the changes that I've made with the event. So I have an initial filtering rule that's going to do some suppression. And I've also got a custom incident. I call it Cisco config 1. And I'm actually just taking a specific trap event and rolling it into an incident. After you upgrade, one thing to note is all of the trap events, they used to be categorized as an open trap receiver category here. They'll be removed. So in order to track kind of the upgrade process, some of the things that you'll want to keep track of will be any of the custom event, any of the standard trap events that you've got, any custom events, the event names and severities. So you might want to just take some screenshots based on the events that you've got in the system because those will be removed after you do an upgrade. One of the things that will stay is if you have an incident defined that is using any trap events, that incident will stay in place. It'll be highlighted in yellow so that you can see that you need to modify it. So you'll need to go back in and modify those to include the new trap events that get added. So do this after you actually, reload and generate the new events. Same with the rules. My suppress config rule is still in place, but if you note in the test, I've got an event type test. It's now blank because the actual event that was in the system was removed. And I'll need to update this as well after I generate some new events. So those are just some of the things that you want to pay attention to as you're upgrading. It's a very straightforward upgrade. The thing to keep track of is looking at, again, what events did you have in the system before the upgrade, and then look at those MIBs and we'll look at how to actually add those events into the system in 15.0. So now we're upgraded to 15.0. We've got patch 1 installed, and let's take a look at what my event management system looks like even before I add a custom, a trap MIB into the system. So if I go under event administration, one of the things I'll take a look at is my projects. If you're familiar with the EMS and have gone through any type of patch upgrades or version upgrades, you'll note that whenever, let's change this to the version and sort it correctly. Here we go. Perfect. You'll see that there'll be a brand new project in place after you upgrade. So this is a new version upgrade. This actually includes any new rules or standard events that come in the system. but it won't include any previous rules that you've got. So pay attention to this one, and you'll want to think about any rules that you've got, and you'll want to think about merging those into this new project. But we're going to start with this new project, which doesn't have any events in it. In addition, any MIBs that you had stored on your system, in previous versions, your first step was to take the MIB definitions and actually copy them onto the file system into the libmibs directory. After you upgrade, any MIBs that you've got copied will still be there. In addition to that, you'll see additional MIBs that we're shipping with 15.0. These are a lot of the common MIBs that we've added into the system just to make it easier for you to be able to generate some additional traps, or some of these MIBs are dependent MIBs. In addition, if I look at the events, let me go back into my project editor and take a look at the standard events. These are the system events that are in the system. As part of 15.0, one of the events that we now ship is called the unknown trap event. That's this one right here. This is for traps that are received by the Entuity server but have not been loaded or had any events created. So this would be equivalent to the old enterprise trap event that you had in previous versions. So just as as kind of a clarification, the enterprise traps are gone. The unknown trap is now replacing those, and that's a standard system severity level 2 event that's been added. So let's generate an event. So I'm going to go into the console on one of my systems. I'm going to be, just easily go into config mode. And let's take a look and see what comes in. I change my event viewer to focus on events. I now have a trap that just came in, and it's unknown. I don't know what the MIB is. I know where it's coming from, but that's about all I know. One of the things that's new in 15.0 is the ability to see the OID that's generating that trap. This is something that wasn't available in prior versions. Makes it really easy to figure out which MIB this is associated with. So if I actually cut and paste this out, go into Google for it, it's the Cisco config man event, and it's part of the Cisco config man MIB. So now all I need to do is grab this MIB and put it on my desktop, or put it on my system here. I don't need to go into the file system on the server anymore, because I'll be able to load this right from the browser. So one of the things, too, that we want to be able to do is understand two of the other rules that are part of the system. So I'm going to go back to the event administration here. And let's go into the rules dialog. All right, so the rules menu, open up and look at the initial filtering rules set. 2 additional rules are part of the standard 15.0 install. The first one is a deduplication event for unknown trap events. So this rule is actually set up to protect you from event floods. So this is enabled by default. It actually suppresses events that come in within a 2-minute period. And it's really good, especially if you've got some very chatty devices and you haven't parsed those MIBs yet, and they're all coming in as unknown. It's a good way to suppress any type of floods that you might be seeing. The second one, which is disabled by default, is the discard unknown trap. So in a case where you don't want to see traps, you don't want to do anything with traps, you've got network engineers that are configuring devices to send traps, but you're not ready to accept them, you can certainly enable this, and any trap events that come in that are not parsed will automatically be discarded. So these 2 rules are in the system by default. One is enabled, the other one is disabled. All right. The other thing you can do with unknown traps, I want to spend some time before we start talking about custom events. With unknown traps, there's a number of things that can actually help you in monitoring your environment. Isolating unknown traps to know which MIBs need to be added can be really helpful, especially if you've got a lot of them. A way to isolate the unknown traps is very quickly create a view and define an event filter for that view just to include the unknown traps. So if you look at the event filter in context to a specific view, you'll only see the unknown traps that are associated with that, with those devices. You can extend this even a little further if you want to include unknown traps or any traps from devices that are not managed. One thing to look at when I'm taking a look at the individual events is I'm actually decoding the source correctly based on a device that I'm managing. If I receive a trap from a device that I'm not managing, the source is always going to be the IP address. So it would be very easy for me to either create a context filter in a view to say, don't look at any devices that I'm managing, only pick up devices that I'm not managing, or even go a step further and create a rule that allows me to isolate the source based on an IP address in combination with an unknown trap. So I could very easily see unknown traps that are from devices that I'm not managing, and that allows me to make a step forward to say, do I want to either manage that device, or should I actually parse those traps in, and should I take corrective action? Alrighty, so let's add the configuration MIB into the system. So let's go back to the event administration, and let's take a look at the new traps menu here. This is where you start, where historically the first step was to copy a MIB onto the file system into the Entuity libmibs directory. I'm going to do this right from the web interface now. So if I click on the Manage MIBs selection, I'm going to go and import a MIB file. So the MIB file I know I want to import is going to be the config.man MIB. Let's open that up. I've successfully imported that. This is equivalent to copying it into the file system. It doesn't do any loading. It doesn't do any event creation. But my next step is to actually load the MIB. Now there's a couple ways that you've probably historically done this. You use the parse MIBs command either with the -c parameter to automatically generate events, or you use it without any parameter just to test the MIB to see if there are any dependent MIBs. So that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm just going to select the MIB and hit the load button. So I've got an error. Let's take a look at this. I'm actually missing the SNMP v2-SMI MIB. So the next step that I need to do is I need to find that MIB and I need to import it into the system. Again, all I need to do is hit the import button. I've got the SNMP v2-SMI MIB here. Let's open it up. I've successfully imported that one. Let's go back down and retest the load. All right, perfect. So I've successfully loaded this. I've not generated any specific events for those trap events, but I have successfully loaded the MIB in the system, and you can see that right here. So I've got 3 events that have been generated. I can see the specific trapoids for each one of them, their description, and on the right side, this is something you want to pay attention to, is the rule count. This is a quick way to see if you've actually generated a custom event or any custom rules for this. So this tells me I don't have any rules. It also means that if I receive this event, it's not going to be parsed correctly, and it's not going to be interpreted as a config.man event. It's still going to come in as unknown. Now there's a couple ways that I can actually generate events, and it really depends upon how big the MIB is and how many events you actually want to add into the system. One way to do this is to individually create the events. And actually, before I do that, I want to just take a look at the details for one of the events because I want to understand some of the var binds. So if I hit the details button, I'm going to look at that trap definition detail for a specific event. I'm going to look at all of the var bind details. And I'm also going to note that the type of each one of these variables is enumeration. So these are enumerated fields where 1 equals erase, 2 equals command source, depending upon the individual varbind, they're going to have a named value for each one of the values for the variables. So this is the way that I can actually see what that looks like, and I'll actually show you where you can reformat these a bit as we go forward during the demo. Let's hit OK, and let's use an example where if I wanted to create a rule individually for this event, all I have to do is hit the Add Rule button, and it's going to create a rule. It's going to generate a rule definition for me. It's going to use this specific OID. It's going to look at that, and it's going to make sure that anything that comes in with this trap then gets set as an unknown trap. Well, that's what it is today. Actually, I'd want to be able to change that into a custom event, whatever I'd want to call it. I could use the default trap name, but if I want to change that, I can either change it to one of my existing events, or I can just with one button generate a custom event and have that set up for me. So I can create a Cisco config man event. If I had a clearing event, I can add that into the system definition as well. If I want to create a default incident for this, I can add that in as well. So I can do this all from one step, and this is really effective if you've got a MIB, again, that you might have 100 trap events for it, but you don't want to create rules or custom events for all of them. You want to individually select the ones that you care about. Now also note the set details, and I referred to this a little bit before, but the set details area is where the formatting for the varbinds can actually be set up. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do this, but this is actually just a set of text strings, and if you reorder these, you can change how the varbinds and the variables are actually ordered in the details panel of the event. Now in my case, I'm actually going to create events for all of the trap events that I've loaded. I want to do this all in one shot. This is going to be equivalent to the parse mibs-c parameter. So in order to do that, I first need to actually unload this MIB. So I'm going to go back into Manage MIBs. I'm going to select it. Now I can sort the columns and just look at the ones that are loaded. And I'm going to unload it. If I hit the close button, you see that it's now gone. Let's go back in and reload it. And let's create rules and events all at the same time as the load. All right, I've added 3 custom events. You can see them identified here, and you can also see them set up in my MIB window here. You also note that I've got 3 brand new rules that have been generated, and I've got an EMS project that has got some unsaved changes. I'll keep track of this because until you save and deploy your projects with the event management system, you're not going to be able to see the events as they come in. They're still going to be decoded with whatever the live project is. So make sure to save and deploy this as you make changes in order for them to take effect in the system. All right. Let's go to the next step and take a look at the events themselves. So if I go to the events column or events menu here and sort based on the category, you'll see all 3 of these events are now categorized as custom events. Prior to 15.0, these used to be categorized as open trap receiver events. The default severity is always set to informational, and you can certainly change that. But I want to make the clarification that these are now custom events versus what they were previously. As I get an event that comes into the system, if I go back and generate an event now that I've actually got this saved, or I don't have it saved, but if I generate an event, I'm actually not going to see it because I haven't deployed the project. So actually, let's go in and deploy the project. I would have forgotten that, and then I would have had to explain around it. All right. I now have 3 new custom events. I have the associated rules that have been created with them. They're in the trap processing folder here. I can take a look at any of the rules. I can certainly edit these. This is exactly like the rule that I could have created individually for the traps, but this was done automatically when I selected the Create Rules and Events box when I loaded the trap. Now if I go back and test this, we'll get out of config mode and go back in and take a look at any events. And you see that I've got a Cisco config man event here. It's severity level 1. If I went back and looked at the incidents, it's not there. The reason it's not there is because we don't create an incident by default for anything that is severity level 1. So in order for me to generate an incident, I would need to make a change to the severity level, or I could actually make a change to the severity level and create a custom incident as well. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But the important thing to know is when I'm looking at incidents, if I've got trap events that are coming in with severity level 1, they're not going to have incidents created, so I won't see them. The other thing to note is the historic events. Now you'll see a series of different config man events and unknown events in my system here, and this is actually because I was doing some testing earlier. But the unknown trap event that we had, which is the same MIB and the same varbind, same OID, is still going to be maintained with its original event details. So as you make changes in the system, the historic events are still going to be maintained the way they were. So don't get confused because thinking that the old one should have changed after you made a system change as well. Only new events that come into the system are going to reflect the behavior with your live project. All right. So we've created this. The next step is to really look at that event and find ways to effectively create an incident. One way to do that is to just simply change the severity. So I can go into the editor for the event. I can go in and change the severity. Let's make it major. Hit save, and let's deploy the project. If I go back now and retest this, and take a look at the events, I've now got a brand new incident called the Cisco config man event. It's reflecting the correct severity. If I take a look at the details, you can see the event that contributed to that is the Cisco config man event with severity level 3. So this is a real quick way to generate an incident for specific events that you want to highlight. All right, let's take this a step further and let's look at creating custom incidents. So I want to create an incident that's actually focusing a number of events. I can certainly do that. All I need to do is go in to the incident menu, go down and add a brand new incident. Let's call this Cisco config. And just for our purposes today, I'll use the same description. I'm going to open this based on any of my trap events that I've added to the system. So the 3 that I've got here are ones that I want to use to open that incident. So I'm going to go in and add these all in. And this will generate a generalized Cisco configuration event based on any of these. Now you can certainly augment this with things like, syslog, somebody logging into the system. There's a lot of things you can do with the EMS to actually consolidate things that are configuration related into a single incident. So you get good visibility into things that are configuration related and understand what really drove that behavior. Now, I don't need to change any updated buy information because these are just individual events that are coming in. They're going to continually update this incident as they come in. I also don't need to add anything into the closed buy because there's no real clearing events for these. The thing that I do need to pay attention to is the age out and expiration. So in my case, I'm going to age these out over 5 minutes, and I'm going to expire this maybe in an hour. So I've got this set up. Again, I've got unsaved changes I need to save and deploy. If I go back into my established and configured incidents, you see now that I've got a Cisco config incident in place. If I go back to the individual events and I take a look at my custom events, you see that I've got some additional, I've got incidents for all of these. Let's go ahead and test this one. And take a look at what comes into the system. There we go. So I've got a brand new incident called Cisco config, and I've got specific events that are actually tied to that. If I take a look at the actual events, I've got the original Cisco config man events that have got the correct severity. So this is a real effective way to, overall bring events into the system and, really give yourself additional visibility. I found that augmenting the normal polling with some of the real-time events, especially for devices that are unique, voice-related, video-related, things like that, you can really give yourself good visibility by selectively picking the SNMP traps that you want to be able to monitor. Now, if the things that we've talked about over the last few minutes are, you'll be able to look at the recorded version of the Tech Talk. But if you're interested in getting more information directly from the 15.0 system, you can certainly do that. Let's see here. One way to do it is in the event administration menu, you'll see a series of tutorial videos. These are all the event management tutorials, and in 15.0, there's a brand new one that covers trap management. In addition to that, if you'd like to look at the Entuity documentation, if you go to the System Admin Guide, and I think I've got it up here, yeah, Chapter 48 actually explains trap management. And if you'd like to use the context-based help, and I just typed in unknown trap, and it brought me to the section that is how Entuity manages traps in the entire trap management section. So there's a number of different methods that you can use to learn more about how to handle traps and actually use some of the video tutorials, which will explain it even in more detail. I think that covers it. JD, is there anything that you saw that I might have missed?
No, I think you've done a very complete coverage there. Let's see whether or not anyone has had any questions. Pat, has anything appeared on the chat line?
Yes, we had a couple questions come in. The first one is, how do we create a trap definition manually if we have no MIB file?
Yes, we've actually worked with one or two of our customers on that very question. There's a couple of approaches. The way that we've helped up till now has been to provide a very short dummy trap MIB definition file, and that contained an example of how to define a trap with its trapoid. It included an example of a single varbind. You could extend that to multiple varbinds, and you'd have to edit that file to make sure that it's reflecting the OID of not only the trap, but also any varbinds that you've got in there. That trap definition file can then be put in just along with any other trap definition file. And we can make that available as an example with the details from the Tech Talk. There's actually a second approach, and we're working on documenting this at the moment, so we don't quite have it available to be shipped out, but we will make it available when it's ready. And that is that the whole mechanism of loading a trap MIB and creating all of those default rules that went with it, you can actually do that by hand and create your own rules using the same syntax. and that would define the trap MIB OID and all of the OIDs of the varbines. But as I say, we're going to produce an app note and extend the documentation to cover that area. Okay, Pat, anything else?
Yeah, we have another question. There doesn't seem to be a way to perform a bulk change of event severity level so that default incidents can be raised by trap events. How would you suggest this be handled if I have thousands of different trap events that I want to generate incidents for?
Pete, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. Pat, can you give me presenter? I think I can show an example for this one. See if we can
Yep.
do it on the fly. See if the share screen works. There we go. All right. So looking at my system. So the question is, I've got a large number of trap events in my system. So if I take a look at my trap events, I would have a huge list that have been added into the system. They've all got rules. If I look at the events, I'm going to see, a large number here, all with severity level 1. Now I might have some custom events and some of the trap events that I've already modified and changed the severity level. But based on the question, it sounds like I'd like to be able to, in bulk, modify these events so that they'll automatically generate incidents if they come in. Now remember, if a trap event comes in at severity level 1, it won't automatically generate an incident. But if we modify the severity level to something higher, that should do what we want to. Now, one way to do that actually is, it doesn't require you to go into every event and change the set severity level. We can actually do this with a rule. Let's go to the rules, and I would probably put this in the initial filtering section. Let's create a rule. Let's call this trap severity. And I'll leave the description off for right now, but there's a couple tests that we would want to look at. The first test is going to look at, let's see, we would do this as a Groovy script actually, because every trap event comes in has an attribute that's associated with it, and the attribute is it's actually called trapoid. And for a trap, that trapoid attribute would have a value in it. Now, if it's not a trap, then it wouldn't have a value. So we would want to look for every event coming into the system that has got a trapoid not equal to null. So let's see, let's set a Groovy script here. We're going to set a parameter for trapoid, and we're going to make it not equal to null. So our first test is to look for an actual trap. The next test, because we've got some traps that have already got custom severities, we only care about the ones that are informational. So let's look for severity levels, event severity test of information or lower, actually. So severity level 1 or lower. And that should complete the test. And actually, at this point, what we would want to do then is take an action that would set the severity. And let's just make this important. Let's make this critical. So this would set the severity to critical. I could deploy this rule, and as events come into the system, this rule would get applied. You want to be careful as to where you put it in the filtering folder or any of the folders, because you may do trap processing before this one, so take care of order. But this should actually accommodate what you're asking for in the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Pete. And I think it's probably a good idea not to be setting these to critical, a lower severity level, but that was just for example's sake. But yep, that's a good approach. And it means that if you load more traps from more MIBs down the line, you don't have to go back and make even bulk selections of events to have the event level changed. The rule will just take care of it all automatically. Pat, are there any other questions?
That looks like that is it.
Right, okay. Well, before we sign off, I want to let you know of our upcoming calendar of events. If you're planning on attending Cisco Live in San Diego in a couple of weeks, we are attending at booth 1137. Stop by and meet the Entuity team. We'd be very pleased to meet you. For those who are also BMC customers, Entuity will be on hand at many of the BMC days around the world, as well as at the BMC Engage event in September. There's also a new training video available with more being created for your use, and that's located on the Entuity Learning Center, which is available through the Entuity website, entuity.com. To wrap up, we will send you a video link of today's presentation for your on-demand use. If you have any questions on SNMP Trap Management, be sure to contact your Entuity Field System Engineer or send us an email. And finally, we hope to see you on Thursday, June the 25th, when we will be showing the highlights found in Entuity 15.5. That's just around the corner. Thanks very much for attending.